The Assassin's Creed franchise has given us dozens of protagonists who fight for freedom, justice, and the Brotherhood. But some of them, they've done things that are genuinely unforgivable. Today, I'm ranking the 8 most evil assassins in the entire franchise, from bad to absolutely despicable. And we're starting with the one name nobody expects to see on a list like this, Altair ibn La'ahad. Yes, the original. The guy who literally started the entire franchise is on this list. And before you lose your mind in the comments, hear me out, because I can prove it. Altair ibn La'ahad is the face of Assassin's Creed. He's the master assassin, the legend, the guy every other protagonist gets compared to. But in the original 2007 game, he's also kind of a terrible person. Not evil in the burn the world down sense, but evil in the way that a supremely talented person who knows they're talented becomes dangerous. Here's the thing. The very first mission of Assassin's Creed shows Altair violating all 3 tenets of the creed in a single operation. He compromised the Brotherhood by acting recklessly in Solomon's temple. He killed an innocent man, an old man who posed zero threat, and he drew attention to the Brotherhood's presence when the entire point of being an assassin is staying hidden. 3 tenets, 3 violations, 1 mission, and it wasn't because he had some grand ideological reason. It was pure ego. Altair genuinely believed the rules didn't apply to him because he was the best. His mentor, Al-Mualim, had to strip him of his rank entirely, dropping him back to novice just to teach him a lesson. The novel The Secret Crusade goes even deeper into this, showing an Altair so consumed by arrogance that he endangered everyone around him without a second thought. Now, does Altair eventually grow into one of the greatest assassins who ever lived? Absolutely. But that redemption arc only exists because he started as someone willing to break every rule the Brotherhood held sacred, all because his pride told him he was above them. He's the warm-up act on this list, the baseline, because if you think breaking the creed out of arrogance is bad, wait until you see what the next assassin did to the entire Brotherhood from the inside. Jacob Frye. Jacob Frye is one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. He's charming, he's funny, he wears a top hat, and he punches people in the face for a living. Victorian London's favorite troublemaker. But here's the thing. If you actually stop and look at what Jacob does throughout Assassin's Creed Syndicate, this man is a walking catastrophe in a waistcoat. Let me explain. Jacob's whole deal is liberating London's boroughs from Templar control. Noble goal, right? Sure. Except his method of liberation is starting an all-out gang war across one of the most populated cities on Earth. He builds up the Rooks, his personal street gang, and throws them headfirst into territorial warfare against the Blighters. Civilians are caught in the crossfire constantly, and the game doesn't even hide this. Syndicate's own narrative repeatedly calls Jacob out for the collateral damage he causes. His sister Evie spends half the game cleaning up his messes because every time Jacob frees a borough, something else collapses. He destabilizes London's economy, wrecks infrastructure, and at one point accidentally poisons the city's medicine supply. The man is a Victorian disaster wrapped in a top hat. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. The Rooks aren't just some group of hardened criminals. Jacob actively recruits children into his gang. Street kids, child laborers, pulled straight off the factory floor and handed knives. This is canon. It's baked into the game's child liberation missions. You save kids from exploitation and then funnel them directly into gang warfare. Nobody bats an eye. The game frames it as heroic, but sit with that for more than 2 seconds and it gets genuinely dark. Jacob isn't evil. In the traditional sense, he's not sadistic, he's not scheming, he's just catastrophically irresponsible, and the body count speaks for itself. But if you think reckless collateral damage is bad, wait until we meet an assassin who didn't just cause harm by accident, but chose to betray everything the Brotherhood stood for. Arno Dorian. Arno Dorian is one of the most sympathetic assassins in the entire franchise, and that's exactly what makes his body count so disturbing. Here's the thing about Arno. He's not a psychopath, he's not power hungry, he's a grieving man trying to avenge his adoptive father's murder while desperately clinging to a doomed romance with a Templar's daughter. Every single decision he makes during the French Revolution is filtered through personal loss, not strategy, not the creed, just pain, and pain makes people sloppy. Assassin's Creed. Unity drops Arno into revolutionary Paris, arguably the most violent setting in franchise history. The Reign of Terror is in full swing. Thousands are being executed in the streets. Civilians are caught between warring factions, and the city is literally tearing itself apart, and into this powder keg walks a man who can't see past his own vendetta long enough to notice who's standing in the blast radius. The community picked up on this years ago. Fans on r/Assassin's Creed have documented how Arno's missions result in significant civilian casualties, either directly through his methods or as collateral damage he never acknowledges. His assassinations don't happen in clean, isolated encounters. They happen in crowded crowded revolutionary Paris during public events in packed streets, and Arno doesn't adapt. He doesn't minimize harm. He charges forward because his grief won't let him slow down. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Jacob Frye causes chaos loudly. You can see it, you can almost laugh at it. Arno causes harm quietly. The civilians around him become acceptable losses he never stops to count, and the game barely forces you to reckon with it. He's so consumed by personal tragedy that the broader human cost of his actions just fades into background noise. That's the darkest kind of evil on this list. Not intentional cruelty, not calculated betrayal. Just a man so broken by loss that he stops seeing the people around him as people. The revolution was already a catastrophe. Arno made it worse, and he never even realized it. But if you think accidental evil is hard to stomach, wait until we get to an assassin whose betrayal was anything but accidental. Shay Cormac. This is where the list stops being fun. Every other entry so far has been relatively straightforward. Someone did terrible things, we can point at them and say that's evil. Shay Cormac breaks that formula completely because his story is the single most morally complicated narrative Assassin's Creed has ever attempted, and honestly, the franchise still hasn't topped it. Here's the setup. Shay starts as a loyal member of the Colonial Brotherhood in the mid-1700s. He's brash, he's reckless, but he believes in the creed. His mentor, Achilles Davenport, sends him to retrieve a precursor artifact from a temple beneath Lisbon, Portugal. Shay follows orders. He touches the artifact, and on November 1st, 1755, the entire city collapses. The Lisbon earthquake killed tens of thousands of people. Buildings folded. Fires spread across the city. A tsunami followed. One of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history, and in Assassin's Creed canon, it happened because the Brotherhood sent an untrained assassin to tamper with first civilization technology they didn't understand. Shay didn't mean to do it. He was following orders from people who should have known better, but he was the one standing in that temple. He was the hand that pulled the trigger. And here's where it gets complicated. Shay goes back to the Brotherhood, traumatized, begging them to stop pursuing these sites. Achilles refuses. So Shay defects, he joins the Templars, and then one by one, he hunts down and assassinates his former brothers. Not faceless targets. People he trained with, people who trusted him. He kills Adewale, the legendary former slave turned assassin who fought alongside Edward Kenway. He dismantles the entire Colonial Brotherhood almost single-handedly. The earthquake? That's a tragedy. You can argue Shay was a weapon pointed by someone else, but the assassinations that followed were deliberate, personal, and carried out with full conviction. Nobody forced him to kill Adewale. Nobody manipulated him into destroying the Brotherhood from the inside. He chose that path because he believed he was right. That's what makes Shay so dangerous on this list. He's not a monster. He's not sadistic. He genuinely believes every kill is justified, and the game frames it that way too, which is exactly why the fan community is still divided on him years later. Some players see a hero who stopped a reckless organization. Others see the franchise's greatest traitor. The truth is somewhere uglier. Shay caused a catastrophe that killed thousands, then responded by killing the people he blamed for it. Both halves of that equation belong to him. But if you think a conflicted Templar is hard to rank, wait until you meet someone who had zero conflict about any of the horrible things they did. Daniel Cross. You've probably never heard of this guy, and that's exactly the problem. Daniel Cross isn't from the games most people played. He comes from the Assassin's Creed comics, specifically The Fall and the Chain, and he's responsible for the single most devastating blow the Brotherhood has ever suffered. Not a city destroyed, not a gang war, something worse. A systematic, global purge of assassin leadership that nearly erased the entire organization from existence. Here's the thing, Daniel didn't start as a villain, he started as a victim. Abstergo got their hands on him when he was a child. They embedded a neural impulse conditioning program deep in his psyche, a hidden compulsion that would activate at exactly the right moment. Then they let him go. They let the Brotherhood find him. They let him train, rise through the ranks, earn trust. He was a sleeper agent who didn't even know he was a sleeper agent. The Brotherhood took him in, believed in him, and eventually he was granted an audience with the mentor himself, the highest leader of the global assassin Brotherhood. And that's when the trigger activated. Daniel assassinated the mentor, the leader of the entire Brotherhood, killed by one of their own. But that wasn't the catastrophe. That was just the beginning. After the assassination, Daniel returned to Abstergo, and the intelligence he carried with him, the locations of Brotherhood compounds, safe houses, and leadership cells across the globe, was used to launch a coordinated purge. Assassin leaders were hunted down and eliminated worldwide. The Brotherhood was gutted from the inside out. Now here's where the debate gets complicated. Was Daniel truly evil, or or was he a weapon someone else fired? The conditioning explains the mentor's assassination, but everything after that, Daniel continued working with Abstergo willingly. He became a full Templar operative. He hunted assassins with purpose and precision long after the initial programming had served its function. At some point, the puppet started pulling his own strings, and the scale of what he enabled is what separates him from everyone else we've talked about so far. The previous entries on this list caused local damage. One city, one Brotherhood cell, one region. Daniel Cross dismantled the infrastructure of the entire global Brotherhood. That's not a betrayal, that's an extinction event. But if you think a brainwashed sleeper agent is disturbing, wait until you meet someone who did everything with full conscious intent. Haytham Kenway. This is the one that's gonna hurt. Haytham Kenway is, by almost universal fan consensus, one of the best characters Assassin's Creed has ever produced. He's witty, sophisticated, ruthlessly competent, and genuinely fun to play as. Players loved him so much that when Assassin's Creed 3 revealed he was actually a Templar, it felt like a gut punch. And that's exactly the problem. Because liking Haytham Kenway doesn't change what Haytham Kenway did. Let me explain why he ranks above Daniel Cross. Cross was a weapon, a broken mind pointed at targets by Abstergo. Haytham built the entire colonial Templar operation in the Americas with full awareness, full intent, and zero coercion. He wasn't brainwashed, he wasn't sleeper activated, he chose this. Every single day, he woke up and chose authoritarian control over human freedom, and he did it with a smile that made you want to agree with him. Here's where it gets complicated, and I want to be fair. Haytham's origin story does earn him some sympathy. He was born into the Assassin Brotherhood, trained by his father, Edward Kenway, and after Edward's murder, he was deliberately manipulated by Reginald Birch into joining the Templar Order as a young man. That's real. That matters. A child doesn't choose who raises him after tragedy, but Haytham wasn't a child forever. As an adult, he became Grand Master of the colonial right of the Templar Order. He orchestrated assassinations, manipulated colonial politics, and built a network designed to suppress freedom across an entire continent. He used people, including Zio, Connor's mother, when it served Templar interests. And when his own son stood against him, Haytham didn't hesitate. He fought Connor to the death rather than question a single Templar principle. That's not brainwashing, that's ideology. And ideology chosen freely is worse than violence committed under someone else's control. Here's the thing that fans don't want to hear. Haytham's charisma is the most dangerous weapon in this entire list. Daniel Cross destabilized the Brotherhood through violence. Haytham could have done the same thing through a conversation over dinner. He makes authoritarianism sound reasonable. He makes the elimination of free will sound like good governance. Players finish Assassin's Creed 3 genuinely wondering if the Templars had a point, and that's not an accident. That's how effective he is. The community adores this man. Fan discussions consistently rank him among the franchise's greatest characters, and honestly, they're right. He is a great character. But a great character and a good person are two very different things. Haytham would have every person reading this living under Templar rule without a second thought, and he'd be charming about it the entire time. But if you think a charismatic Templar convert is as dark as this list gets, wait until you meet someone who didn't need any manipulation at all to become a monster, Rodrigo Borgia. Most of the people on this list wanted power over a city, a faction, or a brotherhood. Rodrigo Borgia wanted power over the entire world, and he nearly got it. Here's what makes Rodrigo different from everyone we've talked about so far. He didn't just infiltrate a powerful institution, he became the single most powerful religious figure in the Western world. Rodrigo Borgia rose through the ranks of the Catholic Church, manipulated his way into the papacy, and became Pope Alexander VI. Not as a man of faith, as a Templar Grand Master using the Vatican itself as a front for the Templar Order. Let that sink in. The institution that millions of people across Europe trusted with their souls, their morality, their entire spiritual lives, was being run by a man whose only goal was total domination of human free will. And that's not hyperbole. That's literally his plan. Rodrigo spent decades hunting pieces of Eden, specifically the Apple of Eden and the Papal Staff, both Isu artifacts capable of controlling human minds on a massive scale. While other villains on this list wanted to kill their enemies or consolidate regional power, Rodrigo wanted to walk into the Vatican vault, access first civilization technology, and use it to bend the will of entire civilizations. Not individuals, not armies, civilizations. The key difference between Rodrigo and someone like Haytham Kenway is scope. Haytham was dangerous because of his ideology, but his ambitions were ultimately contained to the colonial frontier. Rodrigo's ambitions had zero ceiling. He wanted to become, in his own words, a god. He believed the vault beneath the Vatican would give him the power to subjugate every mind on the planet, and he pursued that goal with the full institutional weight of the papacy behind him. But here's where it gets truly dark. Rodrigo didn't need the pieces of Eden to cause harm, he was already causing it. As Pope, he weaponized religious authority to persecute enemies, consolidate Templar influence across Europe, and silence anyone who threatened his agenda. The pieces of Eden weren't his source of power, they were his endgame. He was already one of the most dangerous men alive before he ever touched an artifact. It took Ezio Auditore 2 full games to bring him down. 2. Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are essentially one long story about how deeply Rodrigo's corruption had spread and how much it cost to uproot it. The leading theory among fans is that Rodrigo represents the franchise's purest example of institutional evil, a man who didn't just abuse power, but fused 2 of history's most dangerous systems, religious authority and Templar ideology, into a single weapon aimed at humanity itself. And yet somehow, he's not the worst on this list. Because if you think wanting to control every mind on Earth is as dark as Assassin's Creed gets, the final entry is going to change your mind completely. Juno. Every single person on this list is a monster. Betrayers, manipulators, killers, operating at the worst extremes of what a human being can do. But here's the thing, they're all still human. Juno is not, and she makes every single one of them look like children playing with toys. Juno is an Isu, one of the precursor race that created humanity as a slave species tens of thousands of years before recorded history. She lived during the catastrophe that wiped out her people, and when the other Isu were desperately trying to save the world, Juno was doing something very different. She was scheming to inherit it. Her own people figured this out. Let that sink in. A civilization so advanced they literally engineered the human race looked at Juno and said, "She's too dangerous to let live." They didn't kill her. They couldn't or wouldn't. Instead, they imprisoned her consciousness inside the Grand Temple, locked away for over 75,000 years. Not because of what she'd done, because of what they knew she would do if she ever got free, and what she would do is enslave every human being on the planet. That's not an exaggeration, that's not a fan theory. That is her stated, canonical, documented objective across the games and the official tie-in comic series. Juno's endgame involves using the Shroud of Eden, one of the most powerful pieces of Eden ever created, to construct herself a living precursor body, not a digital form, not a projection, a physical, flesh and blood Isu body that she could inhabit in the modern world. And once she had that body, the plan was total domination of the human species. Every other entry on this list operates within a human moral framework. Betrayal, murder, institutional corruption. Terrible things, but things we can comprehend on a human scale. Juno's ambition isn't on that scale. She doesn't want to control a brotherhood. She doesn't want to rule a city or topple an empire. She wants to reduce the entire human race back to what the Isu originally designed them to be: servants, property. And the worst part? She's been working toward this for millennia. While assassins fought Templars, while Shay betrayed the Brotherhood, while Daniel Cross destroyed assassin camps, while every person on this list was carrying out their schemes, Juno was behind the curtain, manipulating both sides. Templars and assassins alike were nothing more than tools to her. Pieces on a board she'd been playing for longer than human civilization has existed. She influenced events across centuries with zero remorse, zero hesitation, and complete awareness of the suffering she caused. Nobody on this list comes close. Abbas destroyed a single brotherhood. Shay triggered an earthquake. Daniel Cross crippled the modern assassins. All horrific, all unforgivable. But Juno treated every one of those events as a minor move in a game that spans the entire history of the human race. She wasn't imprisoned because she broke a rule. She was imprisoned because an entire civilization of beings more intelligent than any human who has ever lived recognized that she was an existential threat to every person who would ever be born. And as of the comics, her influence hasn't been fully eliminated. The threat isn't theoretical, it's ongoing. That is why Juno sits at the top of this list. Not because she killed the most people, not because she committed the most betrayals, but because her ambition is the complete and permanent subjugation of every human being alive. And she has spent 75,000 years patiently, methodically, remorsefully working to make it happen. Everyone else on this list is a villain. Juno is the villain. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.